Good afternoon, everybody. This is Ralph Staffens with the Brunswick-Golden Chamber of Commerce. We've got a brand new series that I am super excited to tell you about. We're going to have candid community conversations. We're going to have these every other Friday, so look for them at 10:30. They will be live on Facebook. We're working through a new program, so eventually they'll be live on Facebook. But we think it's past time for us to create an avenue where community leaders can come together and talk about topics that need to be discussed. And as we get to the live section, we want to give the community a chance to ask questions and get their questions answered from community leaders. And so once we get to the live portion, you'll be able to submit your questions right there. We'll try to get to them the best we can. But we also encourage you to go to our website, which you see at the bottom of the screen, and pre-submit questions. Our next video is going to be with Dr. Scott Spence, who's the new superintendent of schools. I know it's a little scary to think about going back to school during this pandemic. And so we want to make sure we talk with him about all the precautions they're taking and what happens next as we go through that process. And so that'll be August 21st at 10:30. So if you have any questions for Dr. Spence, please go ahead and submit those to us through our website. I will say that the Chamber of Commerce, we look at ourselves as the anchor of the business community, but our vision, our mission, our DNA is to be the voice of business. And so that's a two-way street. Not only do we communicate with the business community, we want to make sure that the business community and the leaders, the quality of life issues are being communicated back to the community. And so that's why we decided to start this series. And today we're going to tackle a pretty serious issue. We've got an awesome guest on the line. We've got Dr. John Perry with the NAACP, the local chapter here in Brunswick, on the line, and he's going to join us. And we're going to talk about racism, diversity, and inclusion, and what those things mean, and how we've seen those things play out nationally, but more importantly here in the Golden Isles. Dr. Perry, how are you today?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful, Ralph. I'm excited to be a part of this show and the discussion that we're going to have today.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on with us today, taking the time out of your schedule. But to me, this is a hugely important topic, not only here in the Golden Isles, but in the state of Georgia and nationally as well. And so we appreciate your time and helping us dissect this and all trying to understand each other a little bit better, because that's what it's all about. So as we get started, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page with a few terms. I just talked about them. They're diversity, inclusion, and racism. So those are three very different terms, in my opinion. Tell us the differences and what each mean to you.
Well, when we talk about communities, when we talk about cities, states, our United States of America, of course, it's made up of many individuals. And so we know we're the collective whole of different individuals that make us who we are. And so when we talk about, first of all, the idea of diversity, it speaks to the fact that in this sea of individuals that make up the whole of who we are, that those different parts are distinct and that they're different, whether they're different races, whether that's different economic states, and, of course, sexual preference. And so diversity speaks to the fact that within a whole, you have differences amongst the individuals that make that whole. When we talk about inclusion, that means that we have the ability to accept the differences of one another. I may be Black, another person may be Hispanic, but I am able to embrace that person despite the distinct differences that are obvious. And when we talk about racism deals with this idea of one race group believing that they're superior to another. And so just on a basic level, that kind of sums up the idea of diversity, inclusion, and racism.
Great. Thank you. I wanted to make sure we were talking off the same sheet of music, right? And this is a huge topic nationally, right? It's a huge topic statewide. And you hear this narrative. I don't care if you watch CNN or Fox News, you're hearing a narrative of what's going on in our country. But how does the Golden Isles fit into this national narrative? I feel like that Atlanta, parts of our state, might fit into that narrative a little bit more, but how does the Golden Isles fit into that national narrative?
Well, I think like any other place, we are diverse. We have different races. We have different things that make us different. And of course, within the current events that have been taking place, we had the incident with Ahmaud Arbery. And so within this national discussion of what do we do about race, what do we do about the idea of making sure that law enforcement is properly serving. Ahmaud, the death of Ahmaud Arbery played a big part in throwing us into this national discussion of racism.
Absolutely. And that kind of does take me to my next topic and my next question. Like you said, we had a tragedy that happened here in our community, and we had
Right.
every need for peaceful protest. We had every need for voices to be heard, communication to be happening, right? But we kept it peaceful. And so, how do you think that the Golden Isles fared during this tragic event, which was the death of Ahmaud Arbery?
Well, one of the things that I've been very vocal about is that our community has been exemplary. We saw the diverse groups come together and cry out for justice. It wasn't one group of people, but it was our community holistically working together to seek justice for Ahmaud Arbery and his family in this unique tragedy that we faced.
And you're right. It was a tragedy, and we did see people come together and demand justice. I want to go back and talk about the overall race relations in the Golden Isles for a minute. I'm newer to the community, and I think there's surely a divide in our community. And I don't think it's a black, white, Hispanic. I think it is, and I think it's socioeconomic. But I also think there's a unique divide or segregation we face in our community, and it's mainland and island. So, talk to me a little bit about that. What's the overall feeling from where you sit of a divide in our community? And is it getting wider, or is it coming together?
Well, you have what some people would define as blatant racism, and then you have systemic racism, things that are a outgrowth of racism of days of old. And so as a community, I think in terms of how we interact with one another, it's pretty healthy. We don't have in our area people that run around calling people out of their names. Racism is not blatant, but I believe that there are some systemic realities of racism, and it shows up in what in employment, economics, things of that sort. And so we do well in terms of our dealing with one another, but I think there's great opportunity in terms of economic opportunities. And so in some of our employment, um, some of our there's some employment opportunities um, that we can do better at, in being more inclusive.
Absolutely. And so that to that point, I think that you and we've had this conversation offline, but the Chamber of Commerce, we are here. Our mission is to help people go from jobs to careers. Our mission is to create wealth in a community for all people. And so there are a few things that we've even done very recently that we've talked about as an organization, as a chamber, to create a future pipeline of leadership for companies and for our community. And I told you offline the other day about our Leadership Glen program and our goals there. How important do you think that is to create a new pipeline of leaders of all backgrounds for our community? Because sometimes when I look behind me, right, where's that next wave of leaders coming from?
Well, I'm excited about the things that the chamber is doing to create a pipeline of leadership that's inclusive. It's definitely needed. It's one of those small steps that we make to bring about the change that we've been talking about. When you shared the idea with me, one of the things that I said to you was opportunity is so important. I've term the coin, or I term the phrase, the gift of opportunity. And so I really believe that what you all are doing with intentionally developing leaders, and more particularly, being intentional to make sure that it's a diverse group. I think 33% of that leadership group you all have committed to making sure are from the minority community. And so that gives an opportunity that many people would not have had otherwise. And when you're exposed to more, it forces your mind to begin to develop and to see different. And it also develops the personal individual with skills that they need in order to be productive and to be a healthy part of shifting their community. But also, when we have issues arise, like we had with the Ahmaud Arbery's incident, that pool of leaders holistically are able to come together and affect positive change because they've been groomed, they've been developed in this culture of leadership together and develop camaraderie.
Absolutely. And I think developing leaders is very important. But part of leadership, Glenn, is also that network, right? That network that they will create that will last them the rest of their careers and their time here in the Golden Isles. And I think that's just important. So I want to go back for just a second. We talked about how our community handled a tragedy. We talked about peaceful protest. And I agree with you 100%. We did a great job. And I think we were an example to other parts of the country that didn't have the same kind of reason we did to have peaceful protests turn so violent and so ugly. But what could we have done better? What, in hindsight, right? Hindsight's always 20/20. In your opinion, what could we have done better? Because nothing's done perfectly.
Well, honestly, Ralph, I don't believe that the group of people that we assembled could have done anything better. If we're looking at this and say, what could we done better? Then we have to talk about the response of the institutions that were already established. I believe, honestly, that our police department could have responded better to this situation. Um, it troubles me, honestly, and I've been transparent in rallies and in the newspaper about saying this. I don't believe that as the Golden Owls that we ever should have to depend upon outside entities to come in and render justice for our community. And so if there's anything that could have happened better, I would have liked to see an arrest made by our local police department versus the need to have other entities come from the outside to render that particular judgment. But in terms of the community leaders that were gathered, I believe that we did everything that we needed to do. Those community leaders came together, and in coming together, we chose to be proactive. We saw that there was the potential for some problems to happen because our community was upset, were aggravated by the circumstances that had taken place, and rightfully so. And because our county commissioners, for whatever reason, were not speaking, a group of community leaders came together and agreed that we're going to unify and we're going to be proactive. We're going to say to our community and the world that we disapprove of the things that have taken place and that we are demanding justice. And so I think it's hard to say that there's something that could have been done better from the group of business leaders and community leaders that came together to speak out against the injustice that took place.
Well, Dr. Perry, I completely agree with what you said. While we're talking about that group, right? You mentioned this group of leaders. Let's stay right there for a minute. Talk to us about who made that group and some of the background things other people might not know. And I want to say personally, thank you. I know as the president of the NAACP, that forces you into that spotlight during times like this, right? And so you handle that with grace and with character, and I want to say thank you for that. But let's talk about that group. Not only some of the background things, but it came together so organically. And I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about relationships and networks and the importance of those. But looking ahead, is there a role that group needs to play moving forward?
Well, the way that the group came to be, from my viewpoint, because of course there's always different viewpoints, but Cedric King, who was a part of Leadership Glen, who's active with the chamber, he called me and said, listen, there's a lot of concern from our community regarding this incident. Have you heard about it? And I said, I heard rumors about it, but I haven't gotten all the details. And he says, well, it's the same with me. I want to pull together Pastor Mark Baker and Mayor Cornell Harvey to talk to the DA and the interim sheriff about this situation, and we would like for you to join us. And so for me, the talks began at that particular point. We asked them some different questions, and was dissatisfied with a lot of the things that we heard, and felt that it wasn't going to bring adequate resolution for our community. And so we left that meeting saying that we need to try to assemble a greater group of people from our community, so that we can try to get some resolve in this matter. And of course, Pastor Mark Baker has quite a bit of relationships. And so I know he called Mike Malloy, and the two of them began to assemble leaders, from all kind of backgrounds. And what it gave us the ability was to bring our different strengths together. And so that's how the group was assembled. And again, it was a diverse group of leaders. We talked about diversity earlier, different colors, different backgrounds. Everybody was not in the same branch of leadership. There was a diverse group of leaders that brought together their gifts, their abilities, their networks. And we sat down and we had a discussion about what was taking place, and believed that it was very necessary for us to be the voice for the community because they had no adequate representation. We were looking for our Glenn County Police Department to speak to this at a greater level, and was not satisfied with what we were getting back. We were looking for our county commissioners to speak to the situation, and we were not satisfied with what we were getting. And there was just this need from that group of leaders to say that this is not who we are as a community. And as a group of community leaders, we're willing to unify, come together, and be a voice for our community. And so that became something that all of us was very passionate about. It was our hopes that if we stood up and were a voice for our community, that our community would understand that they had leaders fighting for them. And I believe that was the big difference between our community and a lot of other communities. Those people felt like they didn't have leaders that were fighting their cause. But I think we did a wonderful job at being proactive and letting our community know that, listen, you're not in this by yourself. As leaders, we are displeased, and we're unifying to make sure that there's justice for our community and that we're not poorly represented in this matter.
And I couldn't agree more. I think that one of the biggest things you said to me that sticks out to me is the truth is leaders come in every shape and form. You don't have to be elected to be a leader. And I think with that group, what you saw was clergy and business leaders, African American and white, different backgrounds, like you said, come together as leaders in our specific area. And I don't think that you saw one area that wasn't included in that group. And so you don't always have to be an elected official to be the leader. And so I think it was incredible to watch this group deliberately grow, but also organically grow. And I think, I don't want to speak for the entirety of the group, but I think that group still stands ready to play that role if we need to make sure that we work on this issue of racism and make our community more inclusive, don't you?
Yeah, I personally, I've already stated that I would love to see that group of leaders stay together. And as we grow, perhaps even add other leaders who are like-minded in regards to understanding the importance of unity and maintaining peace. That was the beauty of that group for me. I think all of us were on one accord with the idea that we desire to be a unified community that embodies a spirit of peace. So what do we need to do to maintain the unity of our community? And so it was a powerful, powerful group. Um, much of the group didn't know me at the point. Um, and I was so appreciative of their willingness to embrace me and trust me to be one of the spokespersons on the behalf of that group. Because, you know, the NAACP, from a national standpoint, people think that the organization is about Black power, that the agenda of the organization is it leans only one way. But the truth of the NAACP is that it is a group that is supposed to represent all people. We stand for equality of all. And so I was blessed that many in the group were able to discern that I had a heart to unify our community, and they were willing to roll the dice on me and take a chance to allow me to be a voice in the midst of this circumstance that we face together.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of times things like that go on and people just don't know they're going on in the background because it's not seen. And I appreciate your willingness to talk about that. I do want to shift gears a little bit right here. We want to make sure that Glenn County is inclusive as possible. I mean, I think that's the goal of you, the goal of I, the goal of most leaders in our community, if not all the leaders in our community. But it's a big elephant, right? I mean, it's a big elephant that you got to take some small bites out of. So what are some tangible steps that we can take as a community to put this issue to bed eventually?
Well, I've been doing a lot of talks. Finish your statement, Ralph.
I just want to make sure that we're taking action steps that are going to make us more cohesive as a community.
Okay. Well, of course, with all that is taking place in our community, I've been getting opportunity to talk about how do we bridge this gap or how do we bring about progress. And one of the things that I've been sharing is that we have to increase awareness. There have been some people that honestly said, I never knew it was a race problem in our country. I thought everything was okay. And so I think that we have to create opportunities like this for open dialogue and discussion amongst diverse groups so that we bring awareness, first of all. And out of that awareness, there's this acceptance that there is a problem. And then after we can accept that there is a problem, then we can creatively come up with action steps that helps us to address the problem. But it all starts with awareness. And so we have to continue dialogues. We have to create small group discussions, large group discussions, and really talk open and honestly about the ways that racism has creeped up. We have to talk about the idea that if I belong to a church, as a Christian, I'm going to say that because that's my faith. If I go into a church and all I see is Black faces, do I ever think to myself that there's something wrong with this? Because the faith that I practice is a faith that's all inclusive. And if I've been in this church for 20 years of my life and I'm not seeing other people, does that speak to some level of intrinsic racism that I have not been willing to admit to or willing to see? And so when we have these type of discussions, it forces us to be self-reflective. And in being self-reflective, hopefully, we're willing to acknowledge and embrace the reality of racism and the different ways that it appears so that we can create actionable change. So I think it starts with conversation.
Absolutely. And sometimes those conversations aren't easy. Sometimes they're uncomfortable and sometimes they're not easy. because we as people, like you said, to start with, we're diverse and we have different schools of thought, and we don't always understand each other. And so, being willing to work through those uncomfortableness and work towards some real good discussion is very important. And so, we're going to wrap this up pretty soon, but this is a hot topic now. Everybody in the country is talking about this. So, what do we need to do to make sure that we don't lose any momentum that we have working towards this? And in a perfect world, Dr. Perry, what does a perfect race relation look like to you in Glenn County?
Well, um, what does perfect race relations look? Of course, where there is absolute equality. And when I talk about equality, I understand that there is progressive growth. Um, one of the things that I keep trying to embrace or trying to communicate to people is that this started a long time ago, and so there has to be this progressive change. Things are not going to change overnight, and so a perfect way to address what we're going through, I think we have to include our educational system. I think that you have to bring into the conversation our religious system and our business community. I think those three areas are the fundamental foundational areas that will help us to bring about systematic change when it comes to this whole idea of racism. Um, the ideal situation in terms of racism in our community is a community whereby we do not judge each other by skin color, that we look at the character of an individual, and we judge people solely on their value system and their moral standings as an individual um, contributing to our community and our society as a whole.
That's perfect. That's a perfect way to end it. And I think we've got hope to get to that point, right? I think that I always want to end on a very positive note. And I think that while this is something we have been forced to talk about and think about again, I think that has also caused us to make steps in the right direction. But before we get out of here, it's been a pleasure to get to know you personally here very recently. Tell us, the viewers, right, the viewers at home, a little bit about Dr. Perry.
Well, I'm a native originally of Jacksonville, Florida. I was born and raised there, and I came here 13 years ago. I was called by the Mount Sinai Missionary Baptist Church to be their pastor. They saw something in me and said, come on down here and pastor us. And so I pastor a great group of people who have put a great deal of confidence in what they see in me. And I'm extremely appreciative to have the privilege of pastoring them. My personal goal has always been that of empowering people to do my best to help people be their best self. When I was younger, I played a little bit of basketball, and my position was point guard. And when I played basketball, there was this burning desire in me to get people in the game. My father would always scream at me and say, "Shoot the ball, shoot the ball." But there was still this voice in the inside of me that drove me to really set people up to do well. And I think that same spirit now yet drives me in life as it relates to people. I'm someone that wants to see people excel and do their absolute best. And so that pretty much sums up, John Perry. I'm in the business of helping people.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate you taking the time, like I said, to come on for our first candid community conversation. And I'm sure you'll be back again soon. At least I hope you will be. But we appreciate what you do for our community, and God bless you.
Well, thanks so much, Ralph, for having me. And I'm excited about this opportunity to share with you and those that are viewing this segment.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You as well, my friend.
All right, everybody. That wraps up our first candid community conversation. I want to give you a few reminders. Like I said, this is going to be something that's done every other Friday at 10:30 in the morning. And so please join us on August 21st at 10:30 to talk about the school system and going back to school with Dr. Scott Spence. That will be the day after school starts. So we'll have some pretty relevant current data to be able to talk about. Our children are our future. And so as we go through this pandemic, we've got to make sure that our children and our future are getting the education that they need and deserve. I also want to remind you, please check us out on our website. It is the BRUNSWICK-GOLDEN It's run across the bottom of your screen. And on that website, you can find a place to enter our golf tournament. This year's golf tournament is going to be at Sea Palms on September 11th. You all know that's a date of great importance in our country. And so we're going to try to use our 35th annual golf tournament to capture that patriotic spirit there at Sea Palms. Our teams are filling up fast. Please go to our website and sign up for those. But until next time, I just hope that you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And we look forward to seeing you with Dr. Scott Spence on the 21st.